Cześć! Dzisiaj wszystko będzie inaczej niż zwykle, czyli mocno niesamowicie i po angielsku. Ponieważ zamiast mnie i typowego monologu, dzisiaj Gosia porozmawia o doświadczeniu śmierci, a konkretnie o zeznaniach ludzi, którzy doświadczyli śmierci, na przykład klinicznej, z wyjątkowo kompetentną w tym temacie osobą, czyli Jodie Long. Jodie od wielu lat współtworzy wraz z mężem onkologiem fundację badającą przypadki osób, które właśnie przeżyły własną śmierć. To niesamowite historie, a jest ich już ponad 5000. Dlatego koniecznie zostańcie i posłuchajcie. A jeśli nie znacie angielskiego, to włączcie sobie w opcjach pod filmem polskie napisy. Zapraszam.
Hi, we're here today with Jodie Long, an incredible woman who makes this world a better place by making so many good things, spreading awareness mainly. She runs NDRF, which stands for Near Death Experience Research Foundation, and is the largest ND devoted website in the world, where people can share their stories, their experiences, in order to, spread the knowledge and the awareness and consciousness that come, obviously, from these experiences. Jodie is also an attorney, a writer, and a webmaster in other consciousness-centered websites that she, together with her husband, have created. I am very happy, by the way, to be a tiny part of NDRF by translating some of these incredible stories into Polish. These stories are absolutely amazing and life-changing. If any of you are interested in reading some, or if some of you have the experience and want to share it, you will find everything on Jodie's website. You will find a link in the description of the movie below. It is a great pleasure to have you here today, Jodie. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I really appreciate it. And you've been a wonderful help with your translations. I cannot tell you how marvelous it is to be able to do that with other people from all over the world. And it's just remarkable because we have so many participants. I would say that we probably have maybe 1/3 of the website is translated into foreign languages. So we are making a difference all over the world, and it's not just in English.
True. Yes, let me start by asking you if you could tell us more about your mission in general. What does NDRF really do, and what are your goals?
My initial goal when I first started, well, first of all, you see how beautiful the stories are. They talk about love, they talk about peace and hope. And so in my mind, it's like, well, the world could use all of that. And so one of the first things I did when I started is I wanted to bring in people from the Middle East. And I said, okay, we're going to see if we can talk and communicate with these people, because that's what, at the time, with the Iraq war and all that going on, I said, this is where we need the peace the most at this point. And so I managed to get a hold of a gal who was Sudanese, and she was basically she was a journalist who understood English. And so I was able to work with her. And it took a little bit of doing, because, if you've never actually dealt with somebody from another country or another religion or another anything, you find that you got to find those commonalities, and you can't even start your peace process until you find the commonalities. And I think that's what I love about the NDEs, is you can find that we are all part of a human reality. We're not skin color, we're not ethnics, we're not anything like that. We are all part of the human race.
Right. Could you tell us more about the researches that you and your husband have undertaken over the years? How does actually science meet the extraordinary, the mystical experiences that people are sharing with you?
I think that the most important thing is that although we cannot actually reach out and go uh, into the other world to make our science interact with the supernatural, what you can do is what's known as a soft science, which is what psychology is and social sciences. So, what you're looking at is you're trying to get things and elements that are in common. And when you start to get over 5,000 experiences from all over the world, from all different demographics, from all different economic, uh, all the different finances, you just name it. And we have some of the most difference. And we also have differences in whether it's an adult or a child. There are so many differences out there. But when you start to analyze them and you realize that over 5,000 of them, we probably have altogether, I'd say we probably have over 20,000 experiences between all three websites. And a lot of them will come to like the after death communication website. They'll report something, and it turns out that it's actually a near death experience or a shared death experience. And the same thing with the Out of Body Experience Research Foundation, which is everything that's not a near death experience or an after death communication. And so when you get all these different types of experiences together, you start being able to understand what the human experience is. Because when you get those kinds of numbers from that many people reporting it, it's no longer a hallucination. It's actually part of the human reality.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how many did you say you have so far?
Oh, altogether, probably over 20,000.
Wow, that is.
But the near experience is actually very well documented. We've posted over 5,000 experiences there. Many of them are actually spiritually transformative experiences where people have this amazing experience, but they don't die to have it, which is actually part of what a near death experience is. They actually die, they go to another place, they have an experience, and it's usually absolutely amazing where they don't want to come back. And then they do come back to their body to complete their mission or complete something that they needed to do.
So that what you just described is an NDE, a near-death experience, right? So you actually die to come back, right?
Yes.
So what do you think, is there anything all these experiences have in common, actually?
Well, absolutely. Are you talking about just the near-death experiences?
Yes, yes.
The near-death experiences themselves, they have many things in common. They have what we call elements. So even though they may be different, and what occurs during the experience is uniquely different according to each person, it's almost like it's a co-creation between the person and the divine. But even though they are something like that, co-created, they do have certain elements in common, and that's why we're able to call it a near-death experience. And they might have all of these things. They might have some of them. They might have just a few. It depends on how deep the experience is. But they may or may not go through they may or may not go up and see out of their body and see things that are happening around. Like, for instance, if they're in a room and then they go up and they see their body, or they're in a operating room and they might see the staff and see what's happening on the other, or in the room itself. Then they report going through a tunnel. They may or may not go through a tunnel, and a tunnel is a very broad term because it may be something closer to like a wormhole, which is kind of strange, because if you look at the way they describe it, it actually sounds like it's a wormhole, or they're one place and automatically in another place, and they completely skip the tunnel. But that is something that's common because enough people report it. Then they see a bright light, they have all these beautiful feelings, or they have enhanced feelings. They have universal knowledge. They have many people have reported that they can go off, like they go through space before they actually see somebody. But a lot of times they may go into a darkness, into a void. They may then see a pinprick of light, and then they head towards the light, and then they'll see beings, and these beings can either be greeters, they can be beings that are known as far as they can be like relatives, deceased relatives. They may be friends that they had here on earth. They may be holy people, or they may just be angelic beings, or other beings from other places. A lot of times that people will say that these people feel like they're part of the soul family, and so they may not recognize them, but there's a sense of familiarity there. And so those are things that people report. A lot of times they may be shown things. They may have a life review. Then they may then be shown other things, or get to visit with their family, or visit with Jesus, or visit with God. It's varied as far as that goes, but there's usually somebody on the other side that they can talk to if it's a deep experience. If it's not a deep experience, a lot of times they just go above their body. They have beautiful feelings, and they may or may not have universal knowledge, and there may or may not be somebody there with them. But that's just a beginning of an experience. But when they actually go to the other side, and then they can express their and see all these people, or have all these beautiful places that they may visit, it's just truly a remarkable experience. And then a lot of times they may make the determination that they want to come back, or they'll be said, "It's not your time yet. You must go back." And so they come back to their body. It's like being, I had one person describe it, and I was like going, now that sounds pretty, it reminds me of what it must feel like. They said it was like being stuffed into a tube of toothpaste and jammed into it. And I was like, okay, I think I can actually get that. But a lot of times when it comes back into the body, they realize how limited it is, and how it's usually not as free as when they were outside of their body. It's very limiting to be shoved back into a physical, dense body.
I've noticed that because when I was translating some of them, many of them actually say that when they were coming back to they didn't want to come back, first of all. And the second of all, when they actually had to come back finally, their bodies felt uneasy. They felt cold, they felt heavy, they didn't feel very good in their bodies anymore.
And they felt pain.
And yes. And do you know, we will come back to the tunnels later on and everything, but do you know how actually how people's lives have changed after experiencing an NDE? What has changed in most cases?
I would say that people, from what I can tell, when people go to the other side and they come back, they report that they have special gifts. The number one gift is empathy. And that means a lot of times people are so empathic that they're able to intuit somebody's feelings, or many different types of things. If there's something ill with them, they will say that they have healing abilities. Sometimes people even report that they have electrical disturbances. And so they have problems getting near wearing a watch, or getting near a computer. Because it goes off or blinks. And so they're not able to really talk a lot or communicate over these devices.
And in an aspect of life-changing, it is a life-changing experience, right? So yes, empathy. What else? They have other. I will ask you about the superpowers later on, But is there anything else to this? Is there anything like they know? Because some of them say that they actually, what has changed after the experience is that they know that there is no death. They don't fear anymore, right?
That's probably the number one change, is that they don't fear death anymore because they've experienced it. It's great. So why not do it? This is actually considered the unreality, the illusion. And on the other side, that's actually considered home. And so another thing that changes is things like lack of uh, interest in materiality. They also report that they are more uh, giving of their time. They're more generous with people. They're more loving. They are more. They have so many things that they come back to be able to. They're more compassionate. So they're basically, and a lot of times people report that their way of eating changes, their health changes, because they are realize that they need to change the way that they eat in order to be more consistent with uh, a spiritual being. They also report that many times they'll report that they're not only are they more spiritual, but they have more interest in spirit. And so sometimes people will say, "Hey, I see dead people now."
Mm.
You'll see that as a common thing that people discover when they come back from having a near-death experience.
Yeah, but also I think that many people don't know what actually happened, right? If they were not religious or if they were not spiritual before, and something like that happens. I have read many experiences that say, "Hey, I was a child. I didn't know what was going on," and then they came back, and years later they were actually researching what actually happened to them, because some of these experiences took place in the 80s, in the 70s, and nobody actually talked about it in that time, right? So they needed also, it didn't happen right away after the experience. Oh my God, my life has changed, right? It took, at least in some cases, it took time.
A lot of times, in order for somebody to fully understand their reality, as to and to integrate it here with what happens on Earth, many times what happens is that it takes about 7 years to be able to say, "Hey," and to change their lives, to be able to uh, make it so that they can understand their lives as what happened on the other side. A lot of times they'll actually change their spouses, their significant others. They will change many things so that they can feel that love and that compassion. They just get rid of the bad things and they bring in all the good things. But yes, it does take time. And a lot of times, like you were talking about children, I actually think that a lot of times the children are more in touch with their spirituality even before they have their NDE. And that just sort of enhances it. So even though they may not know what happened on the other side, or they may say, yes, that happened, and then they learn how to silence it and not talk about it. But many times, it seems to me that the children are, how do you put this? It's almost like they come in and they're a different type of spiritual beings. You know, like for instance, a crystal child is one of the things that people talk about. And these are a wave of souls that have said, I'm going to come down to Earth. I'm going to incarnate into a physical body, and I'm going to have these types of abilities, or I have this particular mission. And this is my goal. And it's not just one person who's doing that. It's a whole wave of souls who are doing it.
I agree with you totally with the crystal children. I was just wondering, because we all have a mission on this planet, right?
Yes.
It's just that we are born into our bodies, and we have to most of us have to find it out throughout time, through our lives. And the crystal children, as far as I know, they are totally aware, right? These beings, so to speak, they are aware of their mission, right?
Correct. Well, sometimes
Yeah.
they are. I think on a soul level, they're definitely interested, or they know about their mission. But a lot of times, children will not know their mission because they still have some things to learn, and knowing their mission would interfere with their learning process.
Right. Can we go back to the experiences of NDE and the sort of the people that have gained sort of superpowers, right? They some sort of special psychic skills. Can you tell us something more about these skills? Do they? Well, you said a little bit that they have something in common, but isn't it that some people get sort of like a unique gift that they come back from the other side with?
I don't know. I think that more than a unique gift, if I had to guess, I think that it's a change of frequency. And so their cells vibrate differently. And I think that vibration is what may change, for instance, maybe perhaps the DNA. And so it allows them to be able to like, for instance, they can do some telepathy, or they can in tune to somebody. It might add to their empathic abilities because they're able to tune in with people better. And so I'm not sure if it's, quote, a special power. I think that it may actually be a power that everybody has. It's just learning how to access it.
Yeah, I meant the superpowers, like not being able to wear a watch, or seeing the dead people, or knowing before things happen, things like that.
And that may be also a change of frequency.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, like, for instance, they talk about the Celestine prophecies, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but this fellow went down to where the Mayans were, and he was investigating why they disappeared. And while he was down there, he happened to actually stumble onto a doorway, and he could actually see them. And a lot of it was that the human, we are basically an interdimensional being, and he was actually able to see where a whole group of people went, and they went to a different dimension. And a lot of times I've looked at that, and I think some of this dimensional shifting may have to do with how we change our frequency.
So what are these gifts mainly? What are they? What can people do? The extraordinary. What is that can be interesting to people, to some people. Well, I know. I remember reading some people that they couldn't wear a watch because the watch they would stop, or they would see dead people. They would, what else?
Well, I think that when they change their frequency, they're able to do this because they're in a dimensionality. A lot of times, again, like when they come back, they may change their frequency. Another thing is anything that has to do with the paranormal is actually what I would call normal, but people think about it as being paranormal because not everybody has these gifts. Or at least they're not showing them or knowing how to use them. But you'll see things like out-of-body experiences. You'll see things like being able to talk to dead people, or when they meditate, they can talk to many different types of beings. or they may be able to leave their body and go to totally different places. There's things like bilocation. There are so many things that a person can do once they access this higher ability.
Yeah. This is gonna be maybe a little bit funny, this question that I'm gonna ask you. But I've noticed while translating these NDEs that a lot of people have experienced floating above their bodies, right? And then they would move towards a tunnel. And many times this tunnel starts in the corner of the ceiling. Now, it repeated in many stories, actually. And have you got any idea why the corner of the ceiling? Is there it seems like there's a tunnel to other dimensions there. What is it? Is it something you could explain in any way?
Well, they have done experiments or done studies on it where they are trying to prove the NDE, because they felt that if a person was actually outside of their body, that they would be able to spot some little piece of paper in the corner put in a really strange spot, right? But if you notice, when you're reading the NDEs, as you were saying, a lot of people are much more interested in their body. So if they put these things in different spots, a person really isn't going to see them. But if it's close to the body, that would be great, because they probably would see it and they would prove it. But the problem is, when you're in a emergency room, most of them, unless they're in a different part of the world that is not, that is not as sterile, or in a place that, a lot of times, a hospital room is generally extremely sterile, and you can't go just sticking stuff here and there, because it gets in the way of the operation or all sorts of things. So a lot of times the person will not actually see it if they are outside of their body. But as you have said, a lot of times when they're looking at their body, they're maybe about maybe 10 feet above, and then they'll be staring at their body, and they're most of the time I notice that they're by their head, and maybe slightly above, and they will go to the corners when they're getting ready to, when they either want more information to be able to see more as to what's happening with that body down there, or they're getting ready to go to the other side and completely leave the room. And I'm not sure why they would go to a quote corner, but that's what they describe. Yep. So you just go, okay, well, yeah, that's common.
Good. Now, is there something you would say to the people who had experienced an NDE, but are afraid or don't want to share their stories for other reasons? Would you try to convince or encourage them somehow to tell their stories? Because I know people who have experienced the NDE, but they don't want to speak about it at all. I don't know why.
I think that there's a stigma, or maybe it didn't mean as much to them, or maybe they had a negative experience. But I can tell you that we have such a supportive group at the Near Death Experience Research Foundation.org. And by sharing your experience, it actually means that not only are you being supported by others who have gone through that experience, but you're also, there's something about telling the story. And a lot of times people will remember it more. They'll be more comfortable with integrating it into their lives. And so, as hard as it may be to share, it actually, many times, it's actually like a dam of, like a dam of experience. It just kind of, it's like the water, it just explodes. And it's almost like that's something that helps them to be able to accept themselves and accept the experience, and also be able to talk about it to other people and help others. It everything that they need to do, uh, it seems to be part of the spiritual path. Once they open that door, they can't close it, and they don't want to. I mean, it really makes their life so much more filling.
Thanks. What about the negative experiences? Are there a lot of negative experiences? Because I haven't encountered any.
Well, and that's sort of the rub. Negative experiences, I'd say that out of all the experience of people who die and come back, you've got between, depending on who's telling it, you'll have between 5 and 15% of the people who will have a near-death experience. So you can't really determine who will and who will not have one when they die. But out of that 5 to 15%, you're looking at maybe only 2 to 3%, 5% tops, not even 5%. I mean, it's 1 out of 100 people. I mean, it's just so low. And I think part of the reason that it's so low, for instance, if somebody is in an operating room and they are given anesthesia, or even if they're giving, like, for a lot of times for pain, they will give morphine, and morphine will give them a hallucination. It's like an ICU experience. So it will be part REM intrusion. It might have elements of the near-death experience. We've got a couple of them on the website that are actually an ICU experience that flips over to a near-death experience. And it's very clear that when people have this morphine experience, it will be hallucinatory, and they might talk about the zebras that are in the room, that kind of thing. But the near-death experience, when they're talking about that, they're talking about the love, the peace, the universal knowledge. They're talking about something very different, and it's actually extremely lucid. And a lot of times a hallucination is not lucid, or if it just doesn't make sense. It's more like a dream, and it jumps around.
Yeah. When I read these stories, I am absolutely filled with hope and peace, because for me, these experiences, these stories are a proof that we don't actually die, that there is the higher intelligence, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, that takes care of us and loves us. Now, after all the research that you have made, is it actually possible to say with no doubt at all that there is no death and the essence, our essence, goes on? I mean, I know it. I can say I know it, and many people know it, but there are skeptics all over the world who will still doubt it. And so my question is, are we actually ready to state it, that there is no death, as a scientific fact?
I'm ready to say it. I think a lot of it is determined by people's level of proof. And I do have a high enough level of proof, but it's looking at it in a different way. And as far as I'm concerned, when I get 5,000 people that are saying the same thing, it's like, okay, I actually think that's real. I believe that. But a lot of times, I think what a lot of the scientists, their problem is, they say, well, that's something that happened because the brain isn't completely dead. I'm not sure how they can actually say that. One time, I had gone into the hospital, and I had like a kidney infection, and I didn't even realize it. And I had gone into the emergency room, and I had started to go into shock. But what was interesting is I wasn't dead, and yet I couldn't string together a coherent thought or a coherent anything. I just what happened was, it's like the reptilian brain came on, and it basically, I felt intense sadness, really intense sadness, and that definitely is the mammalian brain is not working anymore, but the mammalian brain is. So I wasn't dead, and I honestly don't know. I mean, based on my experience, personal experience, it's like I honestly don't know how people could say that the brain has to be completely dead. I think that there's a certain point that the brain, it just isn't doing rational thought anymore because there's not enough energy to do it.
Can you so can you explain in, well, sort of earthy words what actually happens when we die?
From what I understand, since I'm not a doctor, but what I understand is that people go through, the last thing to leave is the hearing. And so, but I know that we've had people describe their NDE, like when they're having a heart attack, they say they're in intense pain, and then all of a sudden they're free. They know they've died, but they're free. They're not breathing, and they say, "Wow, this is pretty nice out here." That's what I've heard, and so there are probably some physiological things happening, maybe simultaneous with the consciousness leaving the body, but it's pretty. I feel fairly confident at saying that the near-death experience is probably the closest and most proof. You see more proof from it because people actually die for many hours, and yet they're able to describe something that's happening during that time. Now you can get many different things that do happen from the spirit, but I think that the near-death experience is the one that you can see that happen most from. But I can say that a lot of people say, well, that's only temporary death. They don't actually go on. But I disagree with that, because we have other states of consciousness. For instance, people that have died, they've passed over, and then they'll come back and they'll talk to somebody. That's the after-death communication. And that shows that life is not temporary. Your consciousness is on the other side. And they'll tell us what they talk about, like with a relative. And so there's many different ways that people can contact other people through their consciousness. And the consciousness, from what I can tell, is actually, it's something that is attached to a spiritual source, the one, the source, the all, and then there's kind of like an oversoul that kind of comes away from that. It's quoted. It separates from the all. It's kind of like the mediator between the source and the and the spark that comes from source, which is us, and it sort of helps direct us. And so I don't know how that fits in with everything, but I do believe that the soul is definitely alive, and consciousness does come. It survives, and it's interdimensional, and it's immortal
and timeless.
And exactly.
So what is the message that most people come back with from the other side?
That we need to love. We need to love each other more. We need to help people as much as we possibly can. These are all good things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very excited to be able to share these stories with people from all over the world, and people from all over the world share them with us. And so being able to learn to love more, I think that's something that most people, they don't understand what it is. I actually wonder if many people even know what happiness is, what joy is, what true happiness or joy is. And I think that the NDEers, they've been in that place. So they can definitely come back and tell us what real love looks like.
And that there's nothing to be afraid of because we don't really die. I remember
Exactly.
there was one person who I translated that said that they're not afraid of death anymore. They're afraid of dying, though. That was kind of shocking
Yeah.
because I mean, maybe they had this sort of experience where I don't know, maybe the way they were dying was really, really painful, right? So that moment before you go, but what happens after, they're not afraid of anymore.
Correct. And you hear that time and time again.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people recall speaking to other people or entities on the other side. And the interesting thing is that they don't use their mouths to speak. And it repeats again in many, many stories that they don't use their mouths to communicate with one another. They use, they communicate with their minds. And is this something you could explain?
Well, it's telepathy. I mean, you don't need to. The mind, the brain is part of the human reality, but part of the immortal reality is that we're light. And that's just the way that they do it over there. I mean, it's energy to energy. That's how you communicate.
You don't need the words. You don't need to speak, right?
I think that you can use words, and maybe some people need to communicate that way, especially if they are new to the other side. But I think the actual reality is that we have an experience on there by Peter Inn, and he is from Scotland. And he talks about going up to the other side, and he's part of a star system. And he is able to communicate. He explained that it was like he would talk to, you can hear everybody all at once, and you know what they're going to say, but yet they communicate still. I don't know if you can actually put it into words, but it's like you can hear everybody all at once. You know that they're going to be what they're going to say before they say it, but yet they still have these distinct thoughts. And so he came back with a lot to talk about because it was a distinct, it was the distinct way that they had been communicating. I find it beautiful because you can't lie up there. Everybody knows what you're going to say, you know? And so, but it's just the idea that you feel it's not just words, it's love also. So you're communicating not just words, but the emotion behind it. You're communicating in pictures. You're communicating very differently. So I could see why you would want to communicate in telepathy so that everybody could see what could communicate in a certain way that is much more efficient and easier than what we know now.
Now, what is the most interesting thing to you that you have found out throughout all these years of research on NDE? I
think the most amazing thing to me is that we're immortal. I mean, I find that extremely comforting. The other thing is that we're not judged. The only person that actually judges us is ourselves. We say we could have done this better, or we could have done that better, or I'm sorry I hurt that person. I had no idea. You know, and you, when you know that you're not going to be damned to hell or you know, anything like that. It's liberating to know that you can really live. And the important thing is not that you make a mistake. The important thing is, did you learn from that mistake? If you learned, great. That's exactly what you're here for.
Good. Yes. And how did it all begin for you and your husband? Because I know that you do it together, right?
Yeah,
what caused you and your husband's interest in NDE, in the matter of NDE?
Well, he had an interest in it because he was in med school and he had met he had read an article and said, "Wow, if that is really true, then that changes my whole world, the way that I look at the world." And then he actually ran into an NDE and talked to her, and then he realized, "Oh yes, now I must find out what is actually true." So he set up a website to determine for himself what was happening.
Hmm.
And uh, I came along a few years after that, and I didn't like his colors on the website. I said, he has no artistic, no artistic whatever. And so I went in and I redesigned it. And then eventually he got so busy that I said, okay, fine, I'll take over. And I've been doing it for many, many, many years. We've been together for over 20 now, so it's been many years that I've been in with the near-death experience arena.
So he started it, and then you became interested because you're an attorney, right? As a
I stopped being an attorney as of 14 days ago.
really?
Yep, I'm retired now.
Okay, congratulations then.
Thank you.
So you can spend more time with the NDers now.
I can, and I do. Many projects that I'm playing with now, and it's wonderful. It's like a breath of fresh air to be able to do podcasts because it's not just being stuck behind a computer anymore. It's like actually being able to talk to people and experience life, even if it is through a chat room. It's great.
Yeah, it's great. The last question I have is from your own questionnaire for NDers.
Yeah, okay.
And is there anything I didn't ask about and that you would like to add?
You know, you were really thorough. You did really, really good.
Thank you.
I can't think of anything that except for I guess what I would say is that a lot of people lately have been grieving. A lot of people have been losing loved ones, and I think that one of the most important things that people can do, especially if they're going through the grieving process or if they think they have a life-threatening illness, one of the best things to do is actually read, to get knowledge, to understand for yourself, to do the research yourself, and to understand that, hey, this is not just something that somebody's talking about. This is something that really happens. This is something that everybody goes through one way or another. And the people that have gone before us, they're in a much, much better place than we are here. And I think that's actually the sign of love and peace and hope, because that's exactly where the people who have passed before us have gone.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jody. Thank you for this. Thank you for your time. And I just thought about one more thing. Is there an NDE experience in your collection that is especially dear to you somehow? That I don't know, specifically that you like or would like to share?
Well, Peter N, the one that that went up and he was part of the stars. I love that one. But there's also another one that I find very telling, and it's Cougar. He was one of the first ones to talk about his experience and put it on the website. And Cougar, I think he had a fever, and he was going through he was with a medicine man, and they were going through this. He called him, I think it was like Grandfather Roberts or something, but he was going through this experience, and it turned out instead of going to heaven, he actually went to hell. And the reason I consider this a really important NDE is because it shows you what evil looks like. To me, it's demonstrative towards what we need to look at here. And when he went there, at first, the people on the other side, they tried to they took him to all these different rooms, like the room of lust to see if they could get him interested in that, or the room of feasting to see if they could get him to be a glutton. All these things that we're warned against here on earth. Many religions will, the 7 deadly sins, that kind of thing, or the venial sins, you name it. But we're warned against these things. But this is what evil does, and they first tried to seduce him through these different temptations, and that didn't work. And he says no, and they said, well, we're going to have to then if we can't convince you that way, we will destroy you completely. And Kuguri says, fine, I'd rather have oblivion than to join with you. And the long shot of this is what makes it so powerful, is that Cougar was on a spiritual journey, and he wanted to overcome and to be to face the ultimate test of spirituality. For him was to be able to face the ultimate evil, and for him to overcome. And he thought that he did not overcome, but he said, I choose oblivion rather than to go towards this evil. And it turns out that was one of the biggest spiritual quests that he could have done for the type of things that he came to learn on earth. But when he came out of it, he was not, he wasn't in oblivion. He had actually passed the test, and his experience gave him tremendous gifts. I mean, he could see what everybody was thinking. I mean, I was just going, wow, really? You actually knew what people were thinking? He says, oh yeah, I sure did. And this lasted for like several months, because he was just in a different state of mind. And he had the things with the watches. He still can't wear watches. But just to hear him talk about this, it's like the ultimate story that one could go through. And then what he had to do to integrate his reality from over there with over here. I mean, he was very glad that he came back, and et cetera, et cetera. But it, to me, the reason it just stuck in the mind, because I'm like going, we all see this type of evil here on earth. We all have been confronted with it. And at first it may be a series of temptations. So it shows us what choices we are free to make. And for him, he made the right choices, and now he's actually a very free being, and he knows that he can pass any test now here on earth, which just remarkable.
Wow. That's remarkable, really. And there are many stories that I've read that are absolutely incredible.
Yeah, they really are. I love the ones that have to do with the different, like they'll go to a crystal city. I would love to go to a crystal city. I'd love to be able to talk to many people who are on the other side who could just give me information. Just because it's so fascinating to learn about all these different things. You start living in a world where everything is controlled by your imagination or just by your thoughts, and you're like going, wow, I could be in a castle, or I could be in anything you want to think about, you could be there. It would just be wonderful.
Yeah. I remember reading, I didn't translate it, but I remember reading one where I don't remember the name, but the man remembers looking at his own death when he was an elderly man and he was dying, and he remembers his daughter, I think, or granddaughter sitting next to him, and she was grieving. She was feeling very bad, and he was feeling the heaviness of her emotions, and she wasn't she wasn't letting him go, right? And then he went on, and he said he remembered the lightness and everything, and it was wonderful. But then he remembers that moment and moving to another body almost immediately and being born to what he is now. So it wasn't like the near-death experience, like, you know, that something happens to you during your life and you go into the other side and then you come back. But he actually died because he was old and ill, and then his spirit went on, his soul went on, and he was doing everything possible not to move into this new body, but he remembers going with the sperm through the tunnel with everything, and it was amazing. And he remembers it now as a grown-up man.
Yeah, I think that that the other side, it's limitless.
Yeah.
And for us in a limited body to be able to understand that these things happen and these things are real, it's phenomenal, just totally phenomenal. You know, you can only get a flavor of what it might be like. Just amazing.
Yeah. Right, Jody, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing all this incredible knowledge that you have and your experience with us. I'll be happy to make as many translations as possible for you, because I really, really believe that what you do is a great initiative, and it is a way to make lives of many people better and more meaningful. So, yeah, I wish you all the best, and thank you for what you do.
Much success on all your podcasts.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. And we'll be in touch, okay? And whenever we have it ready, we will send it over to you, okay?
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All this technical stuff and being patient.
No problem. No problem.
Okay.
All best. Have a good day. Bye-bye.